Hello there, welcome to another episode of Geeks Cantina. My name is Geeks, and in this episode, I'm gonna be breaking down the pilot episode of Star Wars: The Bad Batch. Now, I'm hoping to be able to break down every single episode of the Bad Batch series. Eventually, it's going to take a bit of time because, as we know, the series is currently running at the moment, and I've only got limited time, so we'll see how we get on. But for now, I want to break down just the very first episode, titled Aftermath. But before I get started, I just want to say right now is that there are massive spoilers ahead. So this is a completely spoilerific breakdown of the episode. So if you haven't seen the episode yet, or if you're thinking of watching it, don't watch this yet. Watch it afterwards, because it's going to have all of my thoughts, opinions, the Easter eggs that I've picked up on. So please don't watch it yet. Watch the episode first, and then watch this. Trust me, it's worth it. And as a massive Star Wars fan, you may have noticed over my other videos, hopefully you've watched my archives, I'm a massive Star Wars fan. So when they announced that the Bad Batch were getting their own series on the tail of the end of the Clone Wars, I was very excited, because their introduction in the final season of the Clone Wars was incredible. I love that 4-episode arc in season 7 of the Clone Wars. And so when the first episode, when Aftermath, this episode started, it started off with the Clone Wars symbol, and then it kind of merged and burnt away, and there was a Bad Batch logo underneath. Oh, that was so good. But what trumped that was literally seconds afterwards, you hear the voice of Admiral Yularen doing the voiceover at the beginning of the episode, much like that he did at the beginning of every episode of the Clone Wars. So immediately you kind of pulled back into that universe straight away, straight back into the Clone Wars, because this episode deals with the end of the Clone Wars and post Order 66, and what the clones did, and what particularly the clones and the Bad Batch did after Order 66. So just from the opening of the episode, I'm already on board, because in case you haven't already watched it, I've got a whole episode dedicated to why you need to watch the Clone Wars. So I'm a massive Clone Wars fan, and immediately it's caught my attention, and I'm drawn in, because yes, this is back to the part of Star Wars I have much affection for, that being the Clone Wars. So kind of right at the beginning of the episode, we see Jedi, which was great, and it's Master Depa Billaba and her Padawan, Caleb Dume. Now, I got a massive kick out of this, because anyone who knows Star Wars Rebels knows that Caleb Dume eventually becomes Kanan Jarrus, who's the Jedi in Star Wars Rebels, voiced by Freddie Prinze Jr. I had to think about that for a sec. So immediately you see Jedi with their lightsabers fighting battle droids, and it's brilliant. I absolutely loved it. And Caleb Dume is voiced by Freddie Prinze Jr. I think they must have tweaked his voice a little bit in post-production, because they've made him sound a lot younger than he actually is. But it's actually voiced by Freddie Prinze Jr., so there's a nice bit of consistency there. And it really lays the groundwork in this episode for what for the transition from Caleb Dume to Kanan Jarrus in Rebels. So straight away, there's already some connective tissue with Star Wars Rebels. And man, I got a massive kick out of this, because again, as a massive Star Wars fan, I also like Star Wars Rebels. But it's also a little bit of a payoff for in the final episode, one of the final episodes of the final season of Clone Wars, you do see Caleb Dume and Depa Billaba, I think that's her name, I think that's how you pronounce it, the holograms very briefly. It's very easy, very quick to miss, and that, but you do see them, and this is what they're doing during that period of the Clone Wars. So it's kind of, again, a nice little, it's a connection to Rebels and a connection to the Clone Wars, and I absolutely love that stuff, because, I'll say it again, I'm a massive Star Wars fan, a massive Star Wars geek. So anyway, there's enough gushing about that. So anyway, so the Bad Batch get introduced as they take out these group of droids and rescue the Jedi and the clones, and we get reintroduced to Wrecker, Crosshair, Tech, Echo, and Hunter, and I love these characters. They're so good. But as a bit of a side note, it's quick to really recognise that the animation has come such a long way. again, I watched the Clone Wars from beginning to end, and I also watched Rebels from beginning to end. And if you go back and watch the very beginning of Clone Wars, the animation is so rudimentary compared to what they can do with these later animated projects. And particularly with there's a lot of snow effects, and there's lots of smoke effects and fire, and the lasers are they just all looks so smooth and so almost realistic, almost live action. Yeah, but they've got their own animated spin on it, of course, but it just looks so much cleaner, and the complex animations are much more obvious, and and it just proves just how much they've put into these animations since the beginning of the Clone Wars. So anyway, back to the plot. There was then it happened, that infamous moment that we've seen on several occasions now, the announcement of Order 66. Okay, so we know that Order 66 activates the clones to turn on the Jedi. Caleb Doom's master gets gunned down, and Caleb runs for the hills. But what happens to the Bad Batch? Well, they apparently are completely unaffected by Order 66. Apparently, they're all unaffected. But again, this is not a spoiler-free breakdown. We know that at least one of them is affected by it, only very subtly to begin with. But we'll talk about that in a little while. So Caleb goes on the run. He's chased by the Bad Batch. Hunter and Crosshair, they go after him, and it really plants the seeds of dissent between Crosshair and Hunter, because you start getting hints that Crosshair has been affected by Order 66, and he says those infamous lines, "Good soldiers follow orders." Now again, that's another reference, an Easter egg to what happened to Tup in the Clone Wars when his inhibitor chip malfunctions, and he says those lines, "Good soldiers follow orders," and he says it over and over again, and that's kind of like a precursor to, clones turning against the Jedi. Obviously with Tup, it happened a little bit too soon, it malfunctioned, but with Crosshair, it's happening, but it's much more subtle. The effects are much more subtle than what happened with the other clones, because the Bad Batch are mutated clones, but again, we'll talk about that shortly. So the seeds of dissent have been planted between Crosshair and Hunter. These two, they bang heads quite a lot in this episode, because Crosshair, because of his Order 66 that's been activated in his brain, he just wants to follow the orders. He wants to kill Caleb, and Hunter, who isn't affected by Order 66, says, well, we just want to talk to him and find out what the heck is going on, because at the moment, nobody knows what's going on. There's a lot of confusion because of Order 66, the clones turning on the Jedi, blah, blah, blah. Hunter and the other members of the Bad Batch don't know what has happened and what's going on, so they're trying to get answers to see if Caleb can shed some light on it. But all Crosshair wants to do is just take him out, because that's what good soldiers do. They follow orders. So this is a good point in the video, just to have a quick mention to D. Bradley Baker, who done all the voice work for the clones in Clone Wars, Rebels, and Bad Batch, and he's done such a bang-up job with creating such individual identities for each of the clones, including the members of the Bad Batch. So a big thumbs up and a big props to him, because he's done such a good job in creating each identity for each of the clones that he's voiced, because clones by definition are duplicates and that. But as we all know from the Clone Wars and Rebels and also Bad Batch, that the clones develop their own identities and characters, and they come up with their own names. So the fact he's done that for every single one of the clones that he's voiced is a testament to just how good of a voice actor that man is. So anyway, so Caleb Doom escapes. He doesn't get killed by the Bad Batch, obviously, because we know that, because he becomes Kanan Jarrus and eventually returns. In the chronology, he returns as Kanan in Star Wars Rebels. So anyway. So in a state of kind of confusion as to what is going on, the Bad Batch, they get in the ship and they return to Kamino. It's good to see Kamino again, the clones' home world. And you start seeing the transition. This is when they start exploring the transition between what happens to the clones when they transition from the Republic to the Empire, and that. So this is part of the story that I think a lot of fanboys are quite eager to find out what actually happens because in the movies it just jumps from one time period to another, and you don't actually see what all the logistics and the things in between. So it's good that they're exploring that in this series. So probably the first thing about this transition from the Republic to the Empire, the first thing that they really explore, and it's through an agent. So we've got Admiral Tarkin again appears in the Star Wars canon, and he's certainly a recurring character. He's been in, I think, most of the Star Wars projects. He featured in Rebels, he was in Clone Wars, now he's in Bad Batch. He's obviously been in them. He was in A New Hope, and he was also in Rogue One as well. So he's a very, very featured character through the Star Wars universe. And why are we not surprised? Why are we not surprised that Tarkin appears in the Bad Batch? Now his aim is to evaluate the clones on Kamino, because he's never been a big fan of clones, and he's all for conscripted soldiers to take over from the clones. And obviously by conscripted soldiers, we all know what that means. It means this is the origins of stormtroopers, which we all know are the soldiers of the Empire. So with obviously Tarkin appearing as well, the clones also come up against a new character, not against, but come to a new character called Omega, or Omega, however you want to pronounce it. And she's a little girl, which immediately set alarm bells off for me, because notoriously in the Star Wars universe, the introduction to younger characters, let's say, haven't really been my favourite thing. Lest we mention Anakin Skywalker, how annoying he is in Episode 1, for the most part, and also the introduction to Ahsoka Tano. Now, as we know, Anakin Skywalker becomes one of the biggest villains and awesome villains in movie history, and also Ahsoka Tano becomes one of my favourite characters in the Star Wars universe. So even though they have rather annoying beginnings, you know, they do eventually become good characters. So I was a little bit worried about Omega, because she is a young character and she's very, you know, tonally very different than the gritty soldiers that that are in the Bad Batch. So I was a little bit worried about this character. Now it's kind of implied in the episode that, you know, that she's a clone, but at least at the beginning of the episode, and her name Omega, or Omega, I'm gonna say Omega, I forgot to. Omega is even her name implies that she's maybe the last clone to be made on Kamino. Maybe just her name implies that. So if you can read that much, if you want to read that much into it, maybe she is. That is yet to be answered. But that's one of the theories, that she could be the last clone, and the fact that she's a female, there's still questions about why they made a female clone, and whether she's actually a clone from Jango Fett's DNA, or whether she's someone else's. And it's also established that the Kaminoans are very protective of Omega for some reason. Again, this is yet to be answered, even in future episodes. So that's going to be a plot line, no doubt, that will be answered later on in the series. There's also a brief reintroduction of a very minor character from the Clone Wars, and that's AZ, the droid. Now he helped Echo when he was investigating why Tup's inhibitor chip malfunctioned when they were on Kamino. Now I think he was only in 2 episodes in the penultimate season of Clone Wars, but it's kind of nice that they threw him back into Bad Batch since they were on Kamino and that. So he was in a couple of scenes, but I got a bit of a kick out of it because he's quite a humorous character. So getting back to Tarkin, he wants to evaluate the clones to see how good they are to be part of the Empire's army. So he sends the Bad Batch into a battle simulation to really see what these clones are made of. So Tarkin, he ends up pushing the Bad Batch to, you know, quite high limits, and ends up using live fire in the battle simulation. So the Bad Batch are actually getting shot at by droids using live laser blasts. And these droids, for your information, they look distinctly similar to the droids that are used in Season 2 of The Mandalorian. Now, whether that's true or not, whether that's intentional or not, which I think it is, because these things are never by accident, and that's a nice little connection to another Star Wars project, The Mandalorian. And again, these droids that are in the Mandalorian were pretty awesome, and they certainly give the Bad Batch a run for their money as well. So because Tarkin decides to push the Bad Batch and use live fire in their simulation, this creates a bit of tension, more tension between the Kaminoans and Tarkin, because the Kaminoans, they don't want their properties, the clones, to be damaged. And Tarkin's like, well, we've got to push these clones to the limits. We've got to see what they're made of, if they're going to be good enough to represent the Emperor in his army. So it's already established that Tarkin doesn't like clones, and that he's not a big fan of the Camino project, and he's looking to sabotage it in any way, shape, or form that he can. And there's a rift starting to form between the burgeoning Empire and the Kaminoans, and that. So again, that'll play into it a little bit later on. But there's a nice little tension building up between the two factions there. So the Bad Batch get through their simulation relatively unscathed. And so, in order to prove their loyalty, they get sent on a mission by Tarkin to a familiar location for Clone Wars fans, and that's the planet Onderon. So in the Clone Wars, the planet Onderon is a 4-episode arc where Rex, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Anakin Skywalker, they train an insurgency group to commit terrorist acts against the battle droids, because that's essentially what they are. They're teaching insurgents to fight a guerrilla warfare against the occupying droid army, and that is also the origin planet or origin home of Saw Gerrera. Again, some more connective tissue, because Saw Gerrera, as we know, has featured other Star Wars projects. First of all, we saw him in Rogue One, then we saw him in Rebels. We saw him in Clone Wars as a younger man first. Then it was Rogue One, then it was Rebels, and they've brought him back for this, at least so far, for this one episode of The Bad Batch. And that, so it's nice to have some more connection. So bringing all of these worlds, these different projects in the Star Wars universe, bringing them all together. Again, I love this interconnective stuff. I get such a kick out of it. So Clone Force 99, or The Bad Batch, are sent to Onderon to eliminate these insurgents. And it's implied that these insurgents are actually battle droids. But, as it turns out, these insurgents are Saw Gerrera and a whole bunch of civilians. Again, this is where Hunter and Crosshair come loggerheads again, because Crosshair wants to follow orders like a good soldier. Order 66, hello. But Hunter, who's also, again, unaffected by Order 66 at the moment, he doesn't want to kill innocent civilians. Well, whether they're innocent or not doesn't matter, but he doesn't want to kill civilians. He takes the moral high ground, and instead of making the soldier's choice, he makes the moral choice and decides, we ain't going to kill these guys, we're not going to execute them. And after a bit of a chat with Saw Gerrera, it's decided that Clone Force 99 are not going to execute these civilians. But unbeknownst to the Bad Batch at the time, Tarkin, this creepy little snake, he sent a probe droid to follow them and monitor their progress. And Tarkin sees in real time that the Bad Batch actually disobeys the orders to eliminate these insurgents with bunny ears. But so straight away, Tarkin's already onto him. So once again, the Bad Batch, they've returned to Camino after their failed mission. Well, not failed mission, but voluntarily failed their mission, easy for me to say. And Tarkin meets them there, puts them in prison, and so they're going to get punished and trialed for treason for not following their orders. And interesting things happens while they're in their incarceration. Is once again Hunter and Crosshair, they bang heads again. They have a verbal slanger match. Crosshair thinks Hunter's gone soft, but this is all obviously the influence of Order 66 inhibitor chip. So after their confrontation, there's a moment between Crosshair and Omega. Omega, who's also been captured, I missed out that little fact, because she's technically a defective clone and she's been incarcerated as well. Omega sits with Crosshair, and she almost has an empathic ability to sense his, that he's angry and he's going to end up doing something stupid. And she almost predicts what's going to happen. Now, for me, that set off some flags, saying, well, she's a clone, but is it possible for a clone to be force sensitive? Yep, I'm throwing it out there. At this point, I've started to think that maybe Omega is special because not only is she a female clone, of who we don't know, but she could also be force sensitive because she literally predicted what was to come after this scene. So Crosshair gets taken away from the rest of the team, and he gets isolated, and Tarkin's cottoned on to the fact that Crosshair has shown some loyalty to the Empire. So they utilize that, and he tells the Kaminoans to enhance the effects of the inhibitor chip, effectively making Crosshair more of a bad guy. Yep, that's right. And in the first episode of the series, they've already broken one character away from the Bad Batch, and they've made Crosshair into a villain. So then there's a scene where the remaining members of the Bad Batch, with the help of Omega, they escape, and they head to the Docking Bay where they get their gear, and they're ready to make their big escape from Kamino. Now again, there was another moment here which is quite easy to miss, is that and quite easy to overlook, is Omega, she senses Crosshair before he even comes into the room. They mentioned about Crosshair being after them now, and Omega says, well, it's going to happen sooner than you think. And literally, as soon as she finishes that sentence, Crosshair, the doors open, and Crosshair and some clone troopers come in to attack them. So I ask the question again, is it possible for a clone to have force-sensitive powers? The evidence is there. Whether or not it's true or not, or whether she's just very empathic and intuitive, who knows? But it's something very interesting that I hope is true, and I hope that gets to be explored. So there's a brief battle between the Bad Batch and Crosshair and the clones, and there's a bit of a to and fro, some shots being fired, blah de blah de blah, and just when you think the Bad Batch aren't going to escape, they get help from one of the Kaminoans. They actually assist the Bad Batch to escape. Now, you do find out later on, I don't think it's so much that the Bad Batch escaped, it's the fact that they escaped with Omega. And there's a scene near the very end of the episode that suggests that her origin is kept a secret from the Empire. So they actually two of these Kaminoans discuss that maybe, no, we should keep this from the Empire, the fact that Omega has escaped with the Bad Batch. So again, there's a lot of mystery around her origins, and that, which is likely to be answered hopefully later on in the season. It hasn't yet, but hopefully later on in the season they'll answer exactly what is going on with this girl, because my initial worries about the character was completely blown out of the water. She is very, very charming, a very, very good character, and she's going to be a good member of the Bad Batch. So that's pretty much it. That's the end of the episode. They fly off into space, ready to find their future. The episode itself is quite long. It's about 1 hour and 20 minutes. It doesn't feel like it. If you're really into this stuff, it really doesn't feel like it's that long. But because they tend to do this with their new animated series, they make a big episode to begin with, and then subsequent episodes are a bit shorter, which they have been. But it was a hell of an opening. There was so much to digest, and we're as I'm doing this video, we've just had episode 6, I believe. So it's taken me a little while to kind of put all the pieces together and to really break down what happened in the very first episode. But a lot happens. There's lots of connective tissues and Easter eggs. So I just wanted to do this video just for this one episode, because there's so much to get the teeth into. I could ramble on for hours and hours about it, because there is so much to talk about. But those are just a few of the things, quite a lot of the things that I found in the episode, which I found was really intriguing. And I really, really hope that they continue on this trend, because as of now, I watched the 6th episode today, and the episode's getting better and better. And this was a hell of a place to start with this new animated series that delves into a part of the Star Wars chronology that hasn't really been explored yet, kind of between the end of Revenge of the Sith and the beginning of episode 4, A New Hope. Yes, we've had Solo, we've had Rogue One, but they don't really go into the meat and bones of what made the transition from the Republic to the Empire. So this is kind of right in the middle of that, and through the eyes of the Bad Batch, we get to explore that. That's a very, very exciting series, and I absolutely love it. And that, so take a breath, geeks. So that's the end of the very first episode breakdown of Star Wars: The Bad Batch. It may be a bit long-winded, but it is a long episode, and there was a lot to break down. Hopefully, when I get to do the other episodes, subsequent episodes, these videos won't be so long. But if you watch it and you can see all the things that I see, then you would understand it is a lot to break down and a lot to talk about. You could go into great length about all of this stuff, but I won't now because I'm rambling. But thank you for watching this video. I really hope you watched it to the end, because there was lots of spoilers in it. But if you've watched the episode first and then you watch this, hopefully I might have pointed out a few things that you've missed, and probably not, because some of them are quite obvious. But anyway, that's the end of this episode. I'm hopefully going to be doing some more content in the future, maybe some more Bad Batch, who knows. But I will be back very soon with more content. Thank you for visiting Gekes Cantina, and I'll see you soon.